On my 17th birthday, my parents confessed they emptied my college fund for my brother's company. What happens when the people who should be your biggest supporters decide you're not worth investing in? For me, it meant starting from absolute zero, after my own parents drained my entire college fund to prop up my brother's doomed business. I was 17, and the air that night was thick with a tension you could almost taste, heavier than the burnt edges of my dinner. My parents, silent and exchanging furtive glances, looked like two conspirators about to deliver a verdict. My mother, usually so meticulous, had been distracted for weeks, whispering with my father, her voice dropping whenever I came near. I'd foolishly hoped they were planning a surprise, maybe that welding certification course I'd been hinting at. They weren't. After the strained meal, my father cleared his throat. "Leo, we need to talk." He gestured towards the living room. My older brother, Jasper, was conspicuously absent, conveniently out with plans, according to Mom. I sat on the couch, Dad in his recliner, Mom beside him, picking at her cuticles. Neither would meet my gaze. Mom began, "We need to be honest with you, honey. My college fund, the one my grandpa had set up for me before he passed, the one that should have held around $18,000 by now, it was gone." "Gone where?" I asked, my voice flat. My father leaned forward, a practiced earnestness in his eyes. Jasper had an opportunity. A tech startup with his college roommate. They needed seed money. He paused, then added, "And your brother? He's got vision, Leo. We knew he'd pay it back once the app took off." The words hit me like a physical blow. My grandfather, the only person in my family who truly cared about my future, had set that money aside for me. And they'd just handed it to Jasper. "What does the app even do?" I managed. "It's called Park Spot. Like Uber, but for parking spaces. People rent out their driveways." I cut him off. "But that already exists. There are like 5 apps that do that." He looked genuinely annoyed. "You don't understand the market, Leo. Jasper has projections." Then my mother delivered the real gut punch. She looked at me, a strange mix of pity and relief in her eyes. "Honey, we didn't think you'd actually go to college anyway. You've always been more, hands-on. Not book smart, like your brother. Jasper has more potential." We had to make a choice. And there it was. 17 years of silent suspicion confirmed in one brutally honest sentence. Jasper was always the golden child. Debate team trophies, business school acceptance. He'd totaled 2 cars before 21 and never faced a single consequence. He borrowed money from everyone and never paid it back, yet always had the newest iPhone. Me? I was the backup kid. The one who spent weekends helping Grandpa Arthur restore his old Camaro while Jasper was off at leadership camps. The one who got a cracked laptop for Christmas while Jasper got a brand new MacBook. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded and asked one question. "When did the app launch?" Dad's face twitched. "Jasper's still working out some kinks." I nodded again. "Cool. Thanks for letting me know." Then I walked to my room, shut the door, and sat in the dark for a long, long time. I didn't sleep that night, but I wasn't moping. I was planning. I sat at my desk until 3 a.m., notebook open, doing the math. I'd been researching welding programs for months, not college, trade school. The kind of education that actually leads to a job with a real paycheck, not just debt. A decent certification program cost about $8,000 for tuition. Tools and equipment, another $2,000 minimum. Certification tests were a few hundred each. I had maybe $450 saved from odd jobs. So, I needed roughly $10,000 in the next year and a half, while finishing high school, while living with people who just told me I wasn't worth investing in. The very next morning, I walked into Arthur's auto body, 3 blocks from our house. Arthur Holland Beck was a Vietnam vet in his 60s, with oil permanently stained into his hands and zero patience for excuses. Once, when I was 15, he'd let me watch him straighten a frame, explaining his process. That stuck with me. I found him wiping down a fender. "I need a job," I blurted out. "Part-time, weekends, whatever. I'll sweep floors, clean toilets, whatever you need." He looked me up and down, took in the dark circles under my eyes. "Why is a kid your age so desperate for work on a Saturday morning?" "My family bet my future on my brother," I told him. "Now I've got to build my own." He stared for a long moment, then nodded. $7 an hour. You mess up, you stay until it's fixed. No whining. When do you start? Now. Brooms in the back. I started that afternoon. The first few months were brutal. 25 hours a week at the shop on top of school. Home at 9 p.m., smelling of grease. Homework until my eyes burned. 4 hours of sleep. Repeat. I learned to eat standing up, to study during lunch. My grades slipped from B's to C's because I was too tired to play the homework game. My parents noticed. Mom would make comments at dinner, the few times I ate with them, saying I looked tired, maybe I should focus on school instead of playing mechanic. Dad would grunt in agreement, then go back to talking about Jasper's app, how close they were to launch. I stopped eating with them. Started buying my own groceries, bread, peanut butter, tuna, kept it in my room. One night, about 3 months in, I almost quit. I was so exhausted I was seeing double. Arthur found me sitting on a milk crate behind the shop, just staring at the wall. He handed me a cup of coffee and sat down. We sat there in silence for 10 minutes. Then he said, "The first year I opened this shop, I slept in the back for 6 months. Couldn't afford rent and a lease. I ate canned beans so often, I couldn't look at them for a decade after. It was hell, Leo, but I built something, and nobody could ever take that from me." I finished my coffee, went back to work. I didn't quit. Arthur was the one good thing about that time. He was the first adult who actually treated me like I had potential. When I showed interest in the welding equipment, he didn't brush me off. He started teaching me basic stuff, how to read a weld bead, how to prep metal, how not to set yourself on fire, which is harder than it sounds. By month 4, he bumped me to $9 an hour. Said I was the hardest working kid he'd seen in 20 years. Said I reminded him of himself at that age. He started giving me more responsibility, customer intake, reading repair estimates, understanding the difference between a car worth fixing and a money pit. One evening, closing up, he asked about my family. I gave him the short version. Parents played favorites. Brother got everything. I got told I wasn't worth it. He was quiet, then told me his old man was a mean piece of work who said he'd end up in prison or dead by 30. Arthur joined the Marines at 18 to get away. Came back from Vietnam and started this shop with his service benefits. His dad died never admitting he was wrong, but Arthur built a good life anyway. I thought about that a lot. Around month 5, I met Marcus, a journeyman welder in his early 30s who rented base space at Arthur's for side projects. Built like a linebacker, always with a beat-up thermos of coffee. He had a way of explaining technical stuff that actually made sense. He talked about pipeline jobs that paid $40 an hour plus per diem, underwater welding gigs that paid 6 figures if you had the certs and the nerve. One evening, I was practicing on scrap metal after closing. Marcus came around the corner and watched. After a minute, he asked if I wanted some pointers. We talked for 2 hours about building a career, what it meant to have skills people actually needed. Over the next year, he became something like an older brother. He'd check my progress, give me tips on certification exams, let me shadow him on side jobs. When I passed my first AWS test, he took me out for burgers. Between him and Arthur, I got something I never had at home, people who actually believed in me. Meanwhile, at home, Jasper's revolutionary app still hadn't launched. But somehow, that didn't stop him from needing more money. 8 months into my grind, I came home to find Jasper's leased BMW in the driveway. Dad had co-signed, but Jasper acted like he'd earned it through sheer genius. He was home from college for spring break, which usually meant he needed something. I tried to slip past the living room, covered in shop grease and not in the mood for whatever performance was about to happen, but Mom intercepted me. She had that hopeful look. She said Jasper wanted to talk to me. Jasper was lounging on the couch in salmon shorts and boat shoes, in March, when it was still 40 degrees outside. He grinned. "Little bro, you look like you crawled out of an engine block." "That's because I did." He laughed, then got straight to the point. "So, the app's hitting some unexpected costs. We need another 15 to get to launch." He leaned back, casual. "Mom and Dad are tapped out, but they mentioned you've been saving up for trade school or whatever." I stared at him. "No." His smile didn't budge. "Come on, Leo. Think of it as an investment. I'll triple whatever you put in. 5% equity. You'll thank me in 2 years. The money's for my future, not your app." The mask slipped. Something ugly showed through. He leaned forward. "You know how much I've done for this family. The stress I'm under. And you're sitting on a few grand playing grease monkey while I'm trying to build something real." I stood up. "Get the money from your investors, or the credit cards Dad's paying the minimums on, or the retirement fund you already drained. You ungrateful little." He didn't finish. "We're done here." I walked past him and Mom, went to my room, and locked the door. That night, I could hear them talking downstairs, voices raised. Something about me being ungrateful. Something about how they handled me wrong when I was growing up. I put in earbuds and studied for my certification exam. Jasper went back to college without saying goodbye. Fine by me. But a week later, I got a call from my credit union. Someone had tried to access my savings account online using my social security number. The attempt was blocked because they couldn't answer the security question. The question was the name of my first pet, a goldfish named Rocket that died when I was 7. Jasper had been in the room when I set up that account 2 years earlier. The bank flagged it as potential identity theft. Asked if I wanted to file a report. I did. The detective said without concrete proof of who made the attempt, the login came from a VPN, there wasn't much they could do. But I knew. Jasper had tried to steal from me twice now. First, the college fund through our parents, now directly. I changed every password, set up 2-factor authentication on everything. Moved my money to a different bank across town, one I'd never mentioned to anyone in my family. Changed my security questions to things nobody could guess. Then I went a step further, pulled my credit report and put a freeze on it. If Jasper or anyone else tried to open accounts in my name, they'd hit a wall. After that, I stopped speaking to him entirely. Stopped pretending we could have a normal relationship. When he texted about coming home for Easter, I didn't respond. When Mom asked why I was ignoring my brother, I told her I wasn't. I just didn't have anything to say to him. The next 6 months tested everything I had. I turned 18 in April, walked into the community college financial aid office, and enrolled in the evening welding program. $8,200 for tuition and fees, paid with a cashier's check from my savings. Watching that money leave my account physically hurt, but it was mine. Arthur gave me a raise when I told him I was starting the program. Said he'd work with my schedule however I needed. Marcus sold me his old welding helmet for $50 when retail was $200, throwing in gloves and practice rods for free. My schedule became inhuman. School from 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Work at Arthur's from 3:30 to 8 p.m. Welding classes from 8:30 to 11 p.m. Home by midnight. 4 hours of sleep if I was lucky. I stopped going to family dinners entirely. Stopped responding to mom's guilt trip texts. Stopped pretending. My parents noticed. One night, Dad cornered me in the kitchen. I was making a peanut butter sandwich at 11:30 p.m., dead on my feet. "You've been real disrespectful lately," he started, arms crossed, full lecture mode. "Tearing this family apart. After everything we've done for you, you can't even show a little gratitude." I set down the knife. "What exactly have you done for me?" He sputtered. "The roof over your head, food on the table, clothes on your back." I met his furious gaze. "That's what parents are supposed to do. You don't get credit for meeting the bare minimum." His face went red. "Don't you talk to me like that. I've been working 50-hour weeks since I was 17. Everything I have, I earned." I picked up my sandwich. "I'm done pretending we're a happy family." I walked past him to my room. That night, I started looking at apartment listings. 2 weeks later, I found one. A studio above a laundromat on the rough side of town. $450 a month, utilities included. The carpet was stained. The walls were thin. I told the landlord I'd take it. Paid first and last month with cash. Didn't put any family members as emergency contacts, I used Arthur's number instead. I moved out on a Saturday morning while my parents were at Jasper's college graduation. The house was empty. Quiet. No lectures, no guilt trips. I loaded everything I owned into my truck in 3 trips: mattress, clothes, grandpa's tools, a microwave, a lamp. That was it. I did one final walkthrough of my room. 17 years. And it took 40 minutes to erase every trace of myself. I left my house key on the counter. Didn't leave a note. The first month in that apartment was rough. The heater barely worked. The neighbors upstairs had a baby that cried at 3 a.m. The laundromat below ran industrial dryers until midnight, so my floor vibrated constantly. The hot water cut out every morning around 6, so I learned to shower fast. The lock on the main door was broken for 2 weeks. I slept with a bat next to my bed just in case. But I made it work. Bought a fan for white noise. Hung blankets over the windows to block the streetlight. Found a used futon on Craigslist for $40 and dragged it up 3 flights by myself. Every night I'd come home exhausted, eat something cheap, study for an hour, fall asleep to the sound of dryers below. And every morning, I'd wake up knowing I didn't owe anyone anything. Mom called the night I moved out, her voice shaking with fury. Said I was being dramatic. Said I'd come crawling back when I realized how hard the real world was. I told her I'd been living in the real world for 2 years already. Then I hung up. The next 2 years were a blur of progress. I finished my welding program with top marks. Passed my AWSD 1.1 structural certification on the first try, then 6G pipe, then TIG for aerospace work. Each test was another tool in the box. The 6G test almost got me, hardest position in pipe welding. You're working overhead, upside down, sideways, all in one continuous bead. The inspector watched the whole time, didn't say a word. When he finally signed off, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, just breathing. Marcus connected me with a foreman named Frank at a structural steel company staffing up for a hospital expansion. Frank was the kind of guy who cared about one thing: could you lay a clean bead under pressure? I demonstrated on a test plate. He hired me on the spot. $24 an hour to start. It felt like I'd won the lottery. I went back to Arthur's shop that weekend to tell him I was leaving. I thought he might be upset. Instead, he shook my hand and said, "Come back when you're ready to buy the place." I laughed. He didn't. The work was brutal. Climbing scaffolding in 100-degree heat. Working in the cold when your fingers were so numb you could barely grip the torch. 12-hour shifts that left my muscles screaming. But I was good at it. I kept my head down. Showed up early, left late. When other guys called in sick, I was there. When they cut corners, I did it right. The crew noticed. Started inviting me to grab food after shifts, asked my opinion on joint prep. One of the older guys, Ricardo, told me I had good hands. By year 2, I was making $33 an hour plus overtime. I moved out of the studio and into a one-bedroom with actual furniture. Bought a newer truck with cash. Started putting money into a Roth IRA because Marcus said that's what smart people do. Frank pulled me aside one day and said he was putting my name in for lead welder on the next project. I even started seeing someone. Chloe was the nurse who treated me at urgent care after I burned my forearm on a hot pipe. Stupid mistake. I was rushing, got careless. She looked at the burn, then at me. This hurt as bad as it looks. I've had worse. She laughed. That's either really tough or really stupid. Probably both. She cleaned the wound, wrapped it up, gave me instructions I probably wouldn't follow. Then, right as I was leaving, she said, "You want to grab coffee sometime?" Our first date was at a 24-hour diner near the hospital. We talked for 3 hours. Her family drama, her goals, her annoying neighbor who played drums at midnight. I told her about Arthur and Marcus in the shop. By the third date, she'd figured out I was dancing around something big. Family stuff, I told her. Complicated. She just nodded. Everyone's got baggage. Chloe was a grinder like me. Worked through nursing school while supporting her younger sister. Had her own stories about broken promises. She didn't care that my relatives were a disaster. She cared that I showed up when I said I would. She met Marcus and Arthur before she ever met my parents. Arthur said she had good energy. Marcus said she was a keeper. For the first time in my life, things were actually good. That's exactly when my family's situation started to fall apart. ParkSpot, Jasper's revolutionary parking app, officially imploded. The beta launch was a disaster. The app crashed constantly. Users complained about the interface. Worse, someone figured out the parking spot rental model had legal issues with city zoning laws Jasper never bothered to research. His partner saw the writing on the wall, jumped ship, and took the proprietary code with him, citing a breach of their operating agreement. The investors demanded their money back, threatened to sue. Jasper didn't have it. Neither did Mom and Dad. All told, the app burned through $65,000, most of it from my parents. My college fund was just the start. Dad had co-signed on a $25,000 loan. When ParkSpot went under, he was personally liable. The bank didn't care that his golden boy had promised to make it all back. Mom had cashed out $18,000 from her 401k to fund what Jasper called necessary pivots. Gone forever. Tax penalty ate another chunk. Jasper dropped out of his MBA to focus on the app, so he had a bachelor's degree and no work experience. I found out through my cousin Sarah at Thanksgiving. Her branch of the family was normal. She told me Jasper had moved back home. Mom and Dad were fighting about money constantly. The word bankruptcy had been thrown around. I sat there eating turkey and listening to her talk. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction. Just emptiness. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize I had, and suddenly it was gone. They'd bet everything on their golden boy. And they lost. I didn't reach out. Didn't offer help. Why would I? They made their choice. Now they got to live with it. But they weren't done trying to drag me into their mess. The first contact came about 6 months after ParkSpot collapsed. I was at a job site, 40 feet up on scaffolding, focused on a tricky overhead weld when my phone buzzed. Ignored it. After the shift, I looked. Text from an unknown number, "We need to talk." Financial setbacks. Family helps family. Mom. I deleted it without responding. A week later, she showed up at my apartment. I came home from a 10-hour shift to find her sitting in the lobby. She looked smaller than I remembered, older, graying hair. She stood up when she saw me, already crying. "Leo, son, just hear me out." I didn't move. Didn't hug her. Just waited. She went through the speech. Then came the ask. "We need $6,000 just to get through the next few months. We'll pay it back." "No." She blinked. "Leo, we're your parents. You spent years handing my future to Jasper. I asked for nothing, expected nothing." I met her eyes. "I owe you nothing. That's unfair. We didn't choose to fall on hard times." "Whose fault was it then?" "Because it wasn't mine. And fixing it isn't my problem either." She left crying. 2 days later, Dad called. Different approach, more aggressive. "You're being selfish. You're just going to turn your back on us when we need you. That's how you repay us." I actually laughed out loud. "Repay you for what? The college fund you stole? The support you never gave? The years you spent telling everyone Jasper was the smart one while I was just the screw-up?" Silence. Then he hung up. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. Jasper showed up at my job site 3 weeks later. I don't know how he found out where I worked. Maybe he asked around. Didn't matter. One way or another, he tracked me down. I was on lunch, sitting on a stack of I-beams, eating a sandwich. I was thinking about taking a long weekend. Then I saw him walking across the lot. Security was supposed to check badges at the gate, but Jasper had always been good at talking his way past people. He looked different, rougher, clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them, unshaven. I sat down my sandwich, stood up slowly. He stopped about 10 feet away. "Can we talk? You got 2 minutes." He launched into the pitch. Full salesman mode, but shakier than I'd ever seen him. "Look, I've got a new idea. Restaurant concept. Fast casual fusion thing. I found the perfect location. I just need 25 grand to lock down the lease. I'll cut you in as a partner. 40% equity. Same song, different verse." "No. You owe me." He got in my face. "You owe this family. We put a roof over your head, food on your plate, and you're just sitting on your money while we're drowning." I stayed calm. "You burned through every cent they gave you, including my inheritance. Now you want my money, too. That's not how this works. You're the reason Dad's drowning in debt. The reason Mom's working at 60. The reason Grandpa's money is sitting in some failed developer's bank account instead of paying for my education." He didn't like that. He shoved me hard. Right there, in the middle of an active construction site, in front of my coworkers. In front of Frank, who'd come out of the trailer to see what the shouting was about. In front of a dozen guys who'd watched me bust my back for 2 years and never once seen me start trouble. I stumbled back but caught myself on the beam stack. For about half a second, every instinct in my body screamed at me to put him on the ground. I could have done it. 2 years of physical labor had put muscle on me, and Jasper had the build of a wet paper towel. But I didn't swing. Didn't shove back. I'd seen enough job site fights to know that throwing a punch in front of witnesses gets you fired, maybe arrested. And I wasn't about to let Jasper, who'd already taken so much from me, take my career, too. So, I just stepped aside and let him stumble past, like the clumsy idiot he was. Then I told him that if he came near me again, there would be consequences. He stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched, looking like he wanted to take another swing. But now Frank was walking toward us, and security was coming from the gatehouse, and Jasper had just enough survival instinct left to know he was outnumbered. Security escorted him off the property. I watched him go. That walk of defeat. The guy who'd spent his whole life being told he was special, finally realizing nobody was buying it anymore. Frank stood next to me as we watched. "Good head on your shoulders," he said. "Let me know if you need anything." That night, I went home and started documenting every interaction, every piece of evidence. I wrote down everything that had happened since the shove. If Jasper wanted to play games, I was going to make sure I had receipts. Jasper didn't stop. If anything, getting tossed off my job site made him worse. First, it was just showing up places. The gym where I worked out. He'd be in the parking lot when I came out, just sitting in his car, watching. Didn't approach. I started leaving through the gym's back entrance. Told the front desk staff to let me know if anyone matching his description came in asking for me. Then Chloe's apartment building. She came home one night and found him standing across the street. He walked away when she pulled out her phone to call me, but she was shaken bad. Then the diner where Marcus and I grabbed breakfast on Saturdays. Jasper sitting at a booth in the corner. Same dead-eyed stare, same silence. He was sending a message, letting me know he could be anywhere. Chloe wanted to call the cops immediately, but I knew how that would go. He hadn't technically threatened me, hadn't touched me since the job site. The cops would take a report, tell me to be careful, and nothing would happen until he actually did something. So, I started building a case. Every sighting got logged, date, time, location, what he was wearing, what he was doing, how long he stayed. I even took photos when I could. Marcus took it seriously. He came over on his day off to help install the cameras. Brought his own drill and a 6-pack of Coke. Took us 3 hours to get everything set up right. The security cameras were cheap ones from Amazon, but they recorded in 1080p and uploaded to cloud backup automatically. Motion activated. We put one in the hallway outside my door, angled to catch anyone approaching, one in the stairwell, one in the parking lot aimed at my truck. If he came near my place, I'd have footage. Chloe handled it better than I expected. Started varying her routes home, texting me when she left work so I knew when to expect her. She kept pepper spray in her purse and a taser in her car. One night, she looked at me and said, "When this is over, we're taking a vacation somewhere with a beach, no phones." I told her it was a deal. We talked about her staying with me more, but my apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building with no elevator and no security. Her place had a doorman. Made more sense for me to crash there when things felt tense. But I wasn't going to let Jasper drive me out of my own home. It felt like living under siege. 3 weeks of that. 3 weeks of jumping at shadows and waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then came the break-in. I came home one Tuesday night after a long shift. It was almost 8 p.m. Something felt wrong before I even reached my door. It was cracked open just an inch, but I always locked it. I stood there for a solid minute, listening. Nothing. No movement inside. No sounds. I pushed the door open slowly with my boot. The apartment had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out and dumped. Closet torn apart. Clothes everywhere. The small fireproof safe I kept under the bed, the one Grandpa Arthur had given me, had been dragged into the middle of the room and pried open with what looked like a crowbar. The lid was bent and scarred. Inside, nothing. Social Security card, birth certificate, the title to my truck, all gone. I walked through the apartment, checking corners. Nobody there. The window was still locked from the inside. The back door hadn't been touched. Whoever did this came through the front. I knew who did it. Jasper had visited this apartment once before, about 6 months after I moved in. Back when I was still stupid enough to think we could be civil. He'd stopped by uninvited, said he wanted to check on me. He'd wandered around for 20 minutes, made comments about the neighborhood, and watched me shove the safe under my bed when I moved it to grab something from the closet. He'd made a joke about my treasure chest. He knew my work schedule. Knew I wouldn't be home until after dark on weeknights. The lock wasn't broken. Someone had picked it or used a bump key. The hallway camera caught him. The footage showed someone his height and build entering the building at 6:47 p.m. Same Nikes he'd been wearing at the job site. He left 40 minutes later with a backpack that wasn't on his shoulder when he went in. I saved the footage to 3 different cloud accounts before I did anything else. Then I called the cops. Chloe came over within an hour. She just walked through the apartment, looking at the mess. Then she started cleaning up. We worked in silence for an hour. The officer who showed up took notes, walked through the apartment, asked if anything else was missing. I checked. The laptop was still there. The cash I kept in a drawer was untouched. Jasper hadn't wanted money. He'd wanted documents. I showed the officer the harassment log, the camera footage, the pattern of stalking that led up to this. He nodded. Said this looked like it might qualify for a restraining order. Said I should document the break-in and call the detective unit in the morning. I did. I filled out paperwork for 2 hours, attached my evidence, and waited for a hearing date. The clerk who helped me told me to keep copies of everything and document every contact. They brought Jasper in for questioning. He denied everything. Said he was just checking on me because the family was worried. Said someone else must have broken in. Then they searched his room at our parents' house and found my birth certificate in his desk drawer. His explanation: I must have given it to him at some point. Nobody bought it. The evidence was enough for a temporary restraining order. The permanent one came through 2 weeks later. 200 feet from me, my home, my workplace, Chloe's apartment. No contact by phone, text, email, third party, or any other means. No showing up at locations I was known to frequent. The judge made it clear any violation would result in arrest. Jasper violated it within 10 days. He showed up at my job site on a Wednesday afternoon. I was up on scaffolding when I heard the shouting. By the time I climbed down, he was standing in the middle of the lot, screaming at the security guard. I got a right to talk to my own brother. I walked toward him, kept my distance. Half the crew had stopped working to watch. Frank was on his radio. Jasper saw me, started pointing. You did this. You ruined everything. You need to leave. Or what? You'll call the cops again. He laughed, bitter. You always thought you were better than me, even when you were sweeping floors. I never thought that. Bull. You wanted us to fail. Wanted to watch us burn. Security stopped him before he got within 20 feet. He tried to push past them. They held him back. The cops arrived in less than 10 minutes. They put him in cuffs while he was still screaming. I gave a statement, showed them the restraining order paperwork on my phone, explained the pattern. The officer nodded, said Jasper would be charged with violation of a protective order. First offense was a misdemeanor, but with his history and the circumstances, the DA might push for something more. I didn't watch them put him in the car. Just went back to work. The fallout came fast. Violation of a protective order. Class A misdemeanor, up to a year in county, though he'd probably get less with a clean record. Combined with his mountain of debt, his unemployment, and the civil suit one of Park Spot's investors had filed against Dad, the family's financial situation went from bad to catastrophic. Jasper got 6 months probation and mandatory counseling. Had to surrender his license until he completed an evaluation. Moved back into our parents' basement. After his arrest, I got a flood of messages. Mom, Dad, even an aunt I hadn't talked to in years. All of them telling me I'd gone too far, that I needed to drop the charges and let this go. I blocked all of them. Extended the restraining order to cover Mom and Dad, too, since they'd been acting as messengers for Jasper. The judge approved it without hesitation. Said third-party contact through family members was a common workaround that courts didn't tolerate. Now, all three of them were legally required to stay 200 feet away from me. And me? I got promoted to lead welder on a high-rise project. Marcus and I started planning a business together. Chloe and I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom in a safe neighborhood. A few months later, a letter showed up, forwarded from my old address. Handwritten, no return address. Mom, saying she was sorry, that they'd made mistakes, that she hoped I could forgive them someday. I read it once, then shredded it. She wasn't sorry for what they did. She was sorry it didn't work out. Last month, Arthur called me into his office after closing. Said his knees can't take the shop floor anymore. His wife's been after him for years to slow down. I'm selling the business, he said. Then he looked at me. I want you to buy it. I sat there for a second. Arthur, I can't afford. I'm not asking for market value. I'm asking for what's fair. He leaned back in his chair. You earned it, kid. I'd rather sell to someone who will run the place right than some investor who will gut it for parts. I didn't know what to say. He smiled. You walked in here at 17 with nothing but grit and a willingness to sweep floors. Look at you now. I wouldn't be here without you. Yeah, you would. Might have taken longer, but you'd have found a way. He stood up and held out his hand. So, what do you say? I shook it. Yes. We spent 3 weeks going over everything. Marcus looked at the numbers with me. Chloe helped with the legal paperwork. Arthur walked me through 40 years of hard-earned wisdom. The paperwork closes next Friday. Marcus is coming on as a partner. We're keeping Arthur's name on the business, Hollenbeck Structural Works. The man gave me a shot when nobody else would. Yesterday, I picked up the new sign from the printer. Navy blue background, white lettering. My name goes underneath as owner-operator. I'm hanging it this weekend. Chloe's bringing coffee. Marcus is bringing donuts. Arthur said he might stop by. My parents don't know about any of it. They're blocked on everything. Restraining order is still active. Last I heard, Jasper's still in their basement, still on probation, still chasing his next big thing. They bet everything on him, left me with nothing. Now I've got the keys to my own shop in my pocket. Funny how that works out. If you've ever had to fight for your future against all odds, or worse, against your own family, I want to hear your story. Do you think I handled this situation correctly, or would you have done things differently? Let me know in the comments below. I'm reading every single one.